What's up, everybody? Welcome back into Lettermen Row. It is a huge off-season report edition of the program. That is Andy Backstrom. That's the 40-year vet Tim May on the other side of that screen. It is a big day for Ohio State because the Buckeyes have landed a key piece of this equation, trying to win a national championship next year. Louisiana-Monroe transfer offensive lineman Victor Cutler, now a member of the Buckeyes program, announced his commitment to Ohio State this week. It is a huge addition for Ohio State. Not a big name, fellas, but it is a position of need for the Buckeyes, and it is a position that Victor Cutler can step in and either provide key depth or become a starter. Tim, I'll start with you. This is a big addition for the Buckeyes. What do you think?
Uh, at first glance, your first question is who's Victor Cutler, and then, like you said, you did your homework on him and found out that the PFF grades on him showed him faring, in my opinion, extremely well against a couple of Power Five conference schools in Alabama and Texas over the last couple of years. So I think that bodes well for him. I mean, clearly they've had the dragnet out to gain one or two or three offensive linemen, whoever they can get their hands on. And, with his size and stuff, it looks to me like he projects, like you pointed out, in an interior spot, either a guard or center. So we'll see where that goes at 6'2", 300 pounds, I think was his last measurements. But anything helps at this point from a depth standpoint, or at least the room standpoint.
Yeah, Andy, this is a big addition for the Buckeyes. Again, not the biggest name. It's not going to be a guy who pops out and you think, oh, this is a difference maker for Ohio State, but it really could be a difference maker for Ohio State. Coming from Louisiana-Monroe, that's not the shiniest program in the South, but this is a guy who's proven himself against some pretty good competition.
Well, that's a lot of offensive line transfers. They're guys from smaller schools generally that are making a big jump to get playing time at a big program like Ohio State. And we saw the other guys that they targeted in the portal this offseason. There's Jeremiah Byers from UTEP that ended up going to Florida State. There was a Johnny Cornelius that was, looking at Ohio State as well, but he ended up at Oregon. There's even Dylan Wade, who went to Tulsa, and then he ended up transferring to Auburn. So those are all guys they offered a tackle spot. This guy looks like he'll be more on the interior side, but he has played tackle in his career. But the small school thing, that's what you're going to see in the transfer portal. A lot of guys making that jump after having success, especially like Tim mentioned, against some Power 5 competition, some great Power 5 competition, no less. And I think that's what Ohio State's getting.
Absolutely. This is a guy who started 21 games at Louisiana-Monroe. He's appeared in 29 career games. He started at right tackle. He started every game this past season for Louisiana-Monroe at left tackle. The Warhawks used him at center. This is not the best program in the country, but when you see a guy go up against Will Anderson at Alabama and against, the defensive front that Texas has, really athletic front, not the most talented, but really athletic, and you see him only give up one pressure, one sack, no pressures and no sacks against Alabama, but against Texas, he gave up one sack. Those are impressive numbers. He had an 84 pass blocking grade against Alabama, according to Pro Football Focus. That's really impressive, considering you're going against Will Anderson and Dallas Turner and all of the talent that Nick Saban has down there. This is a guy who's proven that he can play as a versatile offensive lineman. He can be a swing guy. You need a tackle, he could play tackle. You need a center, he can play center. If you're looking for a guard, there's a possibility he could play guard. I'm told by a pretty high-ranking source that this is a guy who might end up on the interior. Is it at center? Is it a guard? I don't know. But he gives you some flexibility, some positional flexibility, where if Matthew Jones is going to stay at guard, if Donovan Jackson's going to stay at guard, maybe he's a tackle. Or if Donovan Jackson's going to go to left tackle and Josh Fryer plays right tackle, there's a possibility that he can play center or guard. And so all of that is to say the Buckeyes like versatility. They always have on the interior. They liked it when Paris Johnson could play guard and tackle. They liked it when Donovan Jackson has the capability of playing guard and tackle. Josh Fryer's shown the ability to play inside out. Enoch Bimahi that Tim's really high on. So it's just another body that Ohio State can add. And really you go from 7 or 8 deep now to thinking, hey, you might be 9 or 10 deep depending on how the spring plays out, Tim.
Yeah, like I said, that Tim's high on. I like Enoch, man. He's gone in and I thought played well. I mean, yeah, he's had a couple of moments he'd wish he had back, but I thought he's played pretty well. I'm just standing up and defending my position. But I think he's going to be a starter this year, barring any other unforeseen circumstances. Yeah, it's really funny when you go into the portal, because obviously Jonah Jackson was a hell of a get for Ohio State several years ago, now playing for the Detroit Lions and playing well. Came from Rutgers, a Power 5 team. I've always, but Ohio State's gotten burned a couple of times, by guys that you projected as being, hey, they're coming from here, so they're going to be pretty good because, like Alabama. You remember that one year they got a kid, and he turned out. I mean, what my point is, you almost take a cautionary approach to some of the cast-offs from Power 5 teams, if you follow my drift, who didn't quite live up to the billing where they were being recruited. And you look deeply into the tape of like a Victor Cutler. I mean, clearly his tape impresses Ohio State, or they wouldn't even have offered him. I am sure of that, and Justin Fry, I think, sees where he can fit in some respect, either as a vying for a starting job or, at least being like maybe a sixth man. Because here's a guy who has started 21 games out of 29 he's played in on a major college level, and on the Power 5 level, he's played extremely well, like we talked about. So I think this is a good take a shot at this guy.
Yeah, Tim, and that's exactly what this is. Does he fit in the starting lineup? I don't know, but after redshirting in 2019, playing a little bit in 2020, you play 8 games in 2021, then you start all 12 in 2022 for Louisiana-Monroe, who didn't have a great year, but you've got individual pieces that have now jumped in the transfer portal, and we've seen guys from various programs, like you said, Andy. They offered Dylan Wade from Tulsa. Tulsa wasn't a good football program. That's why Kevin Wilson is taking over down there. Rhode Island is an FCS program that struggles, but a Johnny Cornelius is good enough to make the jump. Ohio State kind of swung and missed on some of those guys. Victor Cutler, now a guy who can come in, put his head down, get to work. I'm told that he's going to be arriving in time for spring practice. So the Buckeyes are adding much needed depth, if nothing else, at a position that they desperately needed depth, Andy.
Yeah, I mean, from my time covering Boston College, a guy that comes to mind is Zion Johnson, who came from Davidson. I mean, that's another small school, and he ended up being their best offensive lineman in years, a first-round pick by the Los Angeles Chargers, immediate starter in the NFL. So a lot of it's how you're trending as an offensive lineman. You look at Victor, I mean, he had 200 snaps his first season playing, then 400-plus snaps, then 700-plus snaps. It's a lot about how you're trending. I think the PFF grades, sometimes they're convenient to use. Sometimes they don't tell the full story. I think more of it is the tape, and we'll have to get more into that ourselves, but it seems like the Ohio State staff likes what it sees. And also there isn't this need to start him. If he doesn't pan out the way they maybe think he could, that's okay to just have more depth, because you need to be deep and you need to have positional versatility. If someone goes down, you want a guy who can play center, guard, tackle, or at least guard or tackle, because then you have more flexibility to get your best 5 out there rather than trying to force someone in there because they can only play one position. So I think that's part of it too, just having multiple guys that could come in if needed at the guard spot or at the tackle spot.
Yeah, and the other thing, keep in mind, I mean, in the modern transfer portal world, still Ohio State, if they had signed Victor Cutler, 3 years ago, we'd still be probably ripping on that decision. You understand what I'm saying? I mean, I don't think he was a 5-star. Let me put it that way. But there are a lot of guys, lineman-wise, who aren't quite ready for prime time coming out of high school, as opposed to a receiver or a running back, and hell, even some quarterbacks now that just need to physically mature and get their feet under them as a major college player. And like you just pointed out, Andy, I mean, a guy that goes from Davidson to Boston College to the LA Rams, I mean, that's a great example of what I'm talking about. I mean, you've got to be smart with the guys you pull in, but when you watch the video and have seen a progression by those guys, and I'm sure Ohio State has done that, like I said earlier, you're not taking as big a chance as some people might think.
Yeah, and then you couple that with the other news of this week that Ohio State landed another guy who's going to be arriving in time for spring, going to fill a need for reps, if nothing else, in spring practice. Tristan Gebbia, the former Oregon State quarterback, started 4 games for the Beavers, led them to an upset over Oregon in the 2020 COVID season. So he's got some experience playing at a high level, and now he joins the Ohio State football program in time for spring, along with Victor Cutler. A little bit different roles, obviously. Tristan Gebbia, I think, is coming in to be more of a coach, to take some of those reps. Kyle McCord and Devin Brown can't take all of them in spring practice, and Lincoln Keenholz is not arriving until June. So Tristan Gebbia now can be that experienced guy in the locker room. I wrote on LettermenRow.com on Tuesday. He now is the most experienced quarterback on the Ohio State roster. He
Yeah.
has as many appearances and 3 more starts than Kyle McCord does. So it's an interesting move for Ohio State. It fills a vacuum of having that 4th quarterback on the roster. It's a guy who break glass in case of emergency, can step in and play, has played at a high level, and also he's going to be a coach in the meeting room. He's going to be a guy who, in all honesty, this is probably a move almost similar to Gunnar Hoke, where he's not going to play, he doesn't need to play, but if he needs to get into coaching, he's going to have a good start working with Ryan Day, working with Corey Dennis and Brian Hartline and all those guys. But also, again, break glass in case of emergency. You've got an experienced guy on the bench, Andy, to fill that vacuum.
Yeah, even college football programs need a Case Keenum, you know what I mean? But this guy is mature. I mean, he's got the John Belushi Brother Bluto Award. I mean, he's going into his 7th year of college, which is really, well, you got to do the math on that and go back and recheck it. He signed with Nebraska out of Calabasas, California. Calabasas, which was in the news this past week. That's where Lisa Marie Presley was living, RIP. But the bottom line is he comes from that kind of an affluent area, went to Nebraska to begin with. And then when there was a coaching, I think he left at the coaching change, didn't he? I'm trying to remember what brought him to Oregon State, because it's slipping my mind right now, thinking he was going to find paradise out there. It didn't happen. But and then he had an injury that kept him out of the 2021 season, if I'm not mistaken. So how he's ended up with 7 years, sort of the Stetson Bennett plan, is very interesting. But like you said, it's Spencer, it's good to have a guy who has been under center or in the shotgun, under duress, on the roster, who, like, push come to shove, and like you said, break glass only in emergency. You can use this guy. He might be better than that. Who knows? But I don't think he's, like you said, I think his eyes have got to be wide open when you've got 2 5-star guys ahead of you on a roster who've been champing at the bit to get their shot. You know what I mean? I think he's pretty realistic about what he's walking into, don't you, Andy?
Yeah, absolutely. But again, I think this is more of a chance to take in a coaching role, an opportunity. Look at this staff and what they've done with graduate assistants, promoting guys even from within. I mean, Brian Hartline's the latest example of a guy who's built his career there and, rising up through the ranks, position coach to now a coordinator. And I think if you're looking at a staff that rewards loyalty, that rewards people coming in at a young age and trying to build their career, it's easy to say, well, hey, maybe I could start as a player and start that track a little bit earlier. But yeah, he's got to be one of the most experienced year-wise quarterbacks in college football right now. And the 7th year, to clarify, is because he had that injury waiver he did get granted, because the injury that he had was a hamstring injury in 2020 against Oregon, actually, I think. And it was just so serious that it kept him out all of 2021. So that's why he does have that 7th year. Plus, the COVID year was another year. So originally you have 5 to play 4, but then it was 6 to play 5. And now it's 7 to play 6 technically for him. So yes, he is a 7th year grad transfer. Yes, he probably won't play, but he can offer a lot of help in practice, a lot of help from the coaching standpoint, and also just having a veteran mind in there, I think will be good for that room.
Really quickly, before we get out of here, as Ohio State, it's 2 guys from the transfer portal onto the roster. I think there are 87 now scholarships. Tim, the transfer portal philosophy for Ohio State, and again, just a quick thought on this. It seems like the Buckeyes are getting more aggressive. I still believe they're going to be aggressive yet again in the May transfer window, whenever that opens. Just your thoughts on Ohio State seemingly becoming more aggressive as this transfer portal era comes to be.
Yeah, well, number one, you still got to have guys, possibly leave, to open some slots, and for example, Tristan Gebbia is, I think he's he's not necessarily transfer portal. He's a graduate transfer guy. You know what I mean? Which is a little bit of a different definition, the way I understand it, the way you look at it. But you've got to be aggressive now in the transfer portal. You've got to maybe save scholarships now to be able to go in and reload when you have guys leave, and you have maybe a couple of surprise guys like J.K. Johnson leave. Luke Whippler was a surprise to me. You've got to be immersed in that thing and have a list, basically every position. And that's just like Ryan Day said. if that's the rules, if that's the new way of playing the game, you got to step up and be an expert at playing that game. And I think Ohio State is increasingly going to do that.
Andy?
Yeah, you got no choice. You have to, whether you like it or not. I think there were a few years there as this started to go off of the transfer portal that some coaches were still trying to stick to the high school recruiting. And I think you can do that more than most programs can at Ohio State. But eventually, like we're seeing, you can't just stick to that plan. You got to add guys. And maybe it isn't the big names. Maybe it isn't the Justin Fields every year, or the Trey Sermons. It's guys that you can find that can be impact players, maybe depth-wise. They give you that boost in a position group that has taken a hit, like the offensive line, where 3 guys that were starters are going to the NFL draft. And you need bodies in there, quite frankly. Maybe he ends up being a starter. Maybe he doesn't, in terms of Victor Cutler. But you still need guys in that room in case there's some just catastrophic event where you have injury after injury and you need someone to step up to at least give yourself a chance to field a team that has experience, and you're not just sending out freshmen there and looking like you're a little bit lost.
Yeah, and a great example of how it can impact a team is what happened to TCU this year. They had 13 transfer portal guys on that team, totally rebuilt that team, a 5-7 team, played for the national championship. Well, wait a minute, let's put this. It got to the national championship game. Whether it played for the national championship is up to conjecture. But yeah, I mean, Michigan State a couple of years ago, you can fix things in a heartbeat if you do them the right way.
Yeah, and Ohio State has done that so far this offseason on paper, adding an offensive lineman now as they add former Louisiana-Monroe offensive lineman Victor Cutler. They added Jihad Carter, the starting safety at Syracuse, who has a lot of experience, brings a lot of tenacity to that defensive backfield. And I don't believe the Buckeyes will be done. I think the May window will be very fruitful for Ohio State if it's got guys in there that can help the Buckeyes win a national title. I think they will take them. Ohio State getting a little more aggressive in the transfer portal. The latest addition is just Victor Cutler. But I am just Spencer Holbrook as we get out of here on the latest offseason report. That's Andy Backstrom. That's Tim May. As always, thanks for joining me, guys. Thank you for joining us, fellow people who watch this show. Thank you for supporting Lettermen Row. But for Tim, for Andy, I'm just Spencer Holbrook. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for listening. We will see you guys back for another offseason report very soon.